Okay, today we are diving into something that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie. Literally, taking a tooth from one spot in your mouth and moving it to another. But the really cool part? It's how new tech is turning this super delicate surgery into a perfectly planned performance.
I mean, seriously, think about it for a second. Let's say you lose a molar, but you've got this perfectly good wisdom tooth just sitting in the back, not really doing much. What if you could just, swap them? Well, it turns out that's a real thing.
And there's a name for it. Autotransplantation. It's an incredible option, especially for younger folks, because you get to keep a living tooth. It has its own ligaments, its own life, which is something a metal implant just can't replicate. So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about the single biggest hurdle in this whole procedure. Then, we'll get to the genius solution. We'll look at a key study out of Taiwan that proved this thing works, check out the incredible results, and then wrap it all up with what this means for actual patients. All right, so every great story has some drama, right? And for this one, it's all about a race against time. See, a tooth isn't just a piece of enamel, it's a living organ. And the second it comes out of your mouth, a clock starts ticking, loudly.
And here's the name of the villain in our story: extra-alveolar time. It's just a fancy way of saying the amount of time the tooth spends outside of its socket. And the longer that time is, the worse the chances are that the transplant will be a long-term success.
And researchers figured out something absolutely critical. There are a lot of things that can affect how well this surgery goes, but that time, that extra-alveolar time, is the one thing the surgeon can actually control. So the mission became crystal clear. Cut down that time, and you boost the odds of success big time. And that brings us to the hero of our story, 3D printing. In the medical world, they often call it rapid prototyping, or RP. And what this tech does is pretty amazing. It lets surgeons run a full dress rehearsal before the main event even begins. Now, to really get how big a deal this is, you gotta look at how they used to do it. The old school way worked, sure, but it was basically trial and error, all happening while that living tooth was out of the mouth and that clock was ticking away. So here's how it went down. The surgeon pulls the donor tooth, preps the new spot, and then, and this is the nail-biting part, they would use the actual living tooth to check the fit. They'd wiggle it in, see if it needed adjusting, maybe drill a little more. All of that messing around adds precious seconds, even minutes, to that dangerous out-of-mouth time. Okay, so the new way? It completely flips the script. Instead of that risky trial and error, it's all about having a perfect plan before you even start. It all begins with a super detailed 3D scan of your jaw, called a cone beam CT. This gives the team a perfect digital blueprint of the tooth they want to move. They can then use software to isolate that tooth and get its exact shape and size down to the micron. And here is where the magic happens. They take that digital file and send it to a 3D printer, which prints out an exact plastic replica of the tooth. This model basically becomes the tooth's stunt double. It's a perfect stand-in that lets the surgeon prepare everything without ever putting the real tooth at risk. So now, the surgeon can do the dress rehearsal. They take the 3D printed model and they use it to shape the new socket until the fit is absolutely perfect. They can get everything just right. And only when that new home is 100% ready to go do they extract the real tooth and pop it right into place. No guesswork, no delays. So this all sounds great in theory, but how do we know it actually works better? Well, let's look at the proof. This very technique was put under the microscope in a 2022 study by Dr. Lisa Huang and her team at the Changgung Memorial Hospital in Taiwan. They really wanted to see if this made a tangible difference. So what Dr. Huang's team did was pretty straightforward. They looked at 21 cases of this surgery. Some had been done the old-fashioned, conventional way, and others were done using this new 3D printing-assisted method. They wanted to compare them head-to-head. So did the dress rehearsal actually pay off? Oh yeah, the results weren't just a little better, they were hugely, dramatically better. The data really does tell the whole story here. Remember our villain, that extra alveolar time? Well, with the 3D printed replica, the average time the real tooth was out of the mouth was just 43 seconds. That is an enormous improvement compared to the several minutes it could take with the old method. Just incredible. And this is maybe the most important result for patients. In the group that got the conventional surgery, a whopping 91% of them eventually needed a root canal on that transplanted tooth. But with the 3D printed assist, that number dropped all the way down to 50%. That's a huge difference, and it means the tooth itself is staying healthier. Now here's the really crucial part. After 1 year, the survival rate for the teeth was 100% in both groups.
And why is this so important? It shows that this new technique is not only better, it's just as safe. You're improving the outcome without adding any new risk of the transplant failing. That's a massive win.
And a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? On the left, you've got the x-rays from the day of the surgery. And on the right, that's the same tooth 1 year later. Just look at that. You can see healthy bone, a healthy ligament. The study even saw roots continuing to grow. That's proof of a living, thriving tooth in its new home.
Okay, so we've looked at the science, we've seen the numbers, but let's bring it back to what this all actually means for the person sitting in that chair, hoping for the best.
So for patients, the benefits are huge, and they're clear. First off, the surgery is just faster. You're in and out quicker. You have a much lower chance of needing a root canal down the line, which saves you pain, time, and money. You get to keep your own living tooth, and, as the study points out, in places like Taiwan, this can be a much more affordable option than a pricey implant. It's a fantastic choice, especially for young adults.
You know, this whole thing is just such a perfect example of how one smart idea, a surgical dress rehearsal, can totally change the game. It really makes you wonder, as technology like 3D printing gets even cheaper and more common, what other crazy complex surgeries are next? What other procedures will soon have their own perfect dress rehearsals, making them safer and better for all of us?